The night was ordinary on Earth, or at least it seemed ordinary. Lights filled the cities, people moved through streets, machines hummed in factories, planes crossed the skies. The planet was alive with sound, with signals, with the endless chatter of a billion voices reaching into the stars. Earth was always loud, always busy, always restless. To those watching from the far reaches of space, Earth was never quiet. The humans never slept as one, never turned off their machines, never stopped sending signals. They filled the galaxy with noise, with music, with stories, with war cries, with laughter. And then, without warning, the noise ended. Satellites stopped transmitting, television screens went black, radio signals vanished into silence. Even the hum of the internet, that constant invisible heartbeat of Earth, went dead. One moment the planet was alive, and the next it was silent. Not a whisper escaped into space. It was as if the entire species had drawn in a single breath and refused to release it. Across the galaxy, the watchers noticed, there were always watchers, alien civilizations hidden among stars, listening, measuring, studying. They had long feared humanity, for humans were strange, unpredictable, and dangerous. But now the watchers grew afraid for a different reason. The question spread from system to system, from star to star. What happened to Earth? On the edges of the Orion Arm, an old species of thinkers stared at their instruments. They had tracked human signals for hundreds of years. The humans argued loudly in politics. They sent music across the skies. They played games that echoed between satellites. The thinkers had laughed at the chaos, the disorder, the madness of the human race. But now their monitors showed silence, not interference, not static, only silence. The thinkers trembled because silence was never a good sign. Farther away, and a cluster of hidden colonies, another race of warriors listened. They had respected humans, though they would never admit it aloud. Humans were small and fragile, but they fought harder than giants. When the warriors heard Earth had gone quiet, they did not laugh. They whispered. They sharpened their blades, for they knew silence meant death or preparation for war. On a moon orbiting a red star, traders gathered in their markets. They sold metals, rare stones, creatures caught in jungles. They loved Earth's noise because it meant trade and profit. Humans bought everything, sold everything, argued about everything. But today the traders looked at their receivers and saw nothing. No signals, no messages, no trade routes alive. The traders feared not for profit but for survival, because if the humans were gone, who had the power to erase them? Meanwhile, the Earth itself stood under a quiet sky. People looked up at the stars and saw them glittering, but they did not speak. In the great cities, screens turned black one by one. Phones lost their connections. Machines stopped talking to satellites. It was not a power cut, not a failure, not an accident. It was something greater, something planned. In secret bunkers under mountains, in hidden rooms below the oceans, humans gathered. Their faces were pale, their voices low. They had chosen silence. But to the ordinary person walking in the streets, the silence felt like the end of the world. Families looked at radios and found only quiet. Pilots in the sky lost their connections and flew blind. Children asked their parents why the world had stopped talking, and no parent had an answer. The galaxy panicked, but humanity waited. The silence was not the sound of death, but the sound of holding breath. It was not an ending, but a beginning, though no one beyond Earth yet understood this truth. In the darkness of space, silence traveled faster than fear. Empires paused their wars to listen. Smugglers stopped their trade to watch. Scientists rewrote their calculations in confusion. What force had taken away the noisiest world in the galaxy? What enemy had dared silence the humans? Whispers spread of ancient weapons, of predators that consumed whole planets. Some believed Earth had been destroyed. Others believed Earth had gone into hiding. And a few whispered the most frightening thought of all, that the humans had chosen silence for a reason. That the silence was not weakness, but strength. That the silence meant something was coming. The stars above Earth burned quietly, as if waiting too. The moon reflected its pale light over oceans that no longer carried signals. The cities glowed like jewels but said nothing. The Earth was a stage where the actors had frozen, but behind the curtain movement was happening. And in the heart of the galaxy, fear was growing. The day Earth went silent was the day the galaxy remembered what extinction felt like. And yet, no one could say whether it was Earth's extinction or the galaxy's own. Far away from Earth, hidden among stars, there were those who always watched. They were patient, ancient, and silent. They had no need for war, no hunger for conquest, because their strength was knowledge. For centuries they had listened to the noise of Earth. The humans spoke loudly, fought loudly, loved loudly, and even dreamed loudly. Their songs traveled across space. Their signals cut through the dark, and the watchers collected them all, storing every word, every laugh, every scream. The Watchers were not a single race, but many. Some were thinkers, living in cities of glass and light. Others were warriors, bred for battle under the burning suns. Some were merchants, their ships like floating kingdoms, always hungry for trade. But all of them shared one habit: listening to Earth. They studied the humans the way children studied fire, fascinated and fearful, for humanity was different, and difference always made the galaxy uneasy. The silence of Earth hit them like a blade. Across hundreds of systems, instruments blinked red, receivers that always buzzed with human chaos now echoed with nothing. The Watchers gathered in their halls, their councils, their fleets. They whispered to each other, uncertain. Had the humans fallen to some great disaster? Or had they chosen to hide, to vanish from the galaxy's ears? In the archives of the Orath, a wise species older than stars, records were opened. They had studied many civilizations, watched them rise and fall, and yet they could not explain the silence of Earth. The Orath remembered human wars that burned continents. They remembered human laughter that shook the airwaves. They remembered the first human landing on their moon, a signal that reached far beyond Earth. But now, there was nothing. The Orath elders trembled, for silence was never natural for humans. On the battle moons of the Crawl, warriors sharpened their claws. They had feared humans, not because of size or strength, but because of spirit. Humans never surrendered, even when broken. A soldier might fall, but the army would rise. The Crawl respected this madness, this fire. Now they heard silence and felt unease. They whispered among themselves, "The humans are not gone. They are waiting." The merchants of the Valen felt fear in a different way. Trade was the blood of their lives, and humans were buyers, sellers, deal makers. The humans traded stories, traded dreams, traded weapons, traded hope, but silence killed trade. Without Earth, markets would wither, and if silence came from fear, then the fear would spread, and no trade could survive in a galaxy holding its breath. From the shadows of hidden systems, another voice rose, the voice of scavengers. They had fed on dying civilizations before, stealing technology, stealing lives. Now they watched Earth with greedy eyes. If the humans were gone, the spoils would be endless. But even the scavengers hesitated, for they remembered how humans fought, how they turned defeat into fire, and they wondered, what if the silence is a trap? In the grand halls of the Veer Collective, philosophers argued. Some claimed the humans had destroyed themselves. Others said they had discovered something so terrible that they chose to vanish. And one voice whispered the most dangerous idea of all, that humans had gone silent not from weakness but from choice, that silence was their weapon. Across the galaxy, meetings stretched into nights. Empires paused their wars, fleets delayed their journeys, rulers delayed their decrees. Everyone watched the small blue planet wrapped in silence. Everyone feared because the galaxy knew this truth. If humans were gone, it meant something greater had erased them, but if humans had chosen silence, it meant something greater was coming. On Earth itself, deep under oceans and inside mountains, lights glowed in hidden bunkers. Humans whispered to each other, their plans unfolding like shadows. They knew they were being watched. They knew the galaxy was listening, and so they gave the galaxy nothing to hear, nothing to measure, nothing to fear. But the Watchers felt fear. Anyway, for they had studied every species, measured every empire, counted every star, and only humans had ever surprised them. The silence of Earth was more terrifying than the sound of their wars, because silence meant control, silence meant purpose, silence meant the humans were preparing for something greater than war, and the galaxy could only wait, powerless, restless, afraid. The Watchers had thought they understood humanity, but on the day Earth went silent, the galaxy realized a darker truth. Humanity was not only loud, not only chaotic, not only restless. Humanity was something else entirely, something the galaxy was not ready to face. And in the stillness of space, a single thought grew in every Watcher's mind. Extinction was not approaching Earth. Extinction was approaching them. The silence of Earth spread across the stars like a wave, and with it came something darker than silence, something heavier than fear. It was the shadow of extinction. Whispers moved from one empire to another. The traders told the soldiers told the kings told the common people. Everywhere the same question grew. If Earth was silent, did that mean humans were gone? Or did it mean something worse was coming? In the golden towers of the Orath, the wisest of thinkers debated. They remembered other worlds that had once gone silent, worlds that burned, worlds that were consumed, worlds that left only ruins. Silence was always the first sign of death, but humanity was different. Humanity never went quiet before a fight. So if they were silent now, the Orath whispered, maybe it was because they had seen the enemy already. The Crawl warriors sharpened their weapons, their voices low. They told stories of battles where humans turned defeat into victory. of soldiers who fought even when their cities were burning. If such a species had gone silent, then something G had forced them, and the Krall hated that thought, for if humanity could fall, then anyone could, even the strongest, even the proudest. Among the Veer philosophers, another fear spread. What if the silence of Earth was not a sign of death, but a sign of knowledge? What if humans had discovered something the galaxy was not meant to know? An ancient enemy, an old truth, a shadow that moved from star to star. The philosophers argued through the night, their voices breaking. They said extinction was not only approaching humans, it was approaching all. In the dark markets of the Valen traders, fear became profit. They sold stories of doom, stories of monsters, stories of machines that devoured worlds. They whispered that humans had seen these monsters, that they had silenced themselves to hide. And if humans were hiding, then no one else in the galaxy was safe. Ships refused to leave ports, merchants sealed their vaults, and everywhere the shadow grew. But the strangest whispers came from the scavengers, those who lived by feeding on dead worlds. They claimed they had seen signs in the dark between galaxies, structures moving without life, machines older than stars. They told tales of civilizations swallowed whole, and they said humans were not extinct. Not yet. They were hiding, because they had seen the shadow move, the shadow that always came before extinction. On Earth, beneath oceans and mountains, humanity waited. They saw the silence they had created spread fear across the galaxy. And still, they said nothing. Children asked their parents why the sky had gone quiet. Soldiers stood ready in hidden bases, listening to orders never spoken aloud. Scientists stared at glowing screens, watching patterns in the dark. They knew something was coming, something too big, too ancient, too merciless to fight in the open. So humanity held its breath, and the galaxy mistook it for death. The watchers in the stars grew desperate. Messages crossed light years, councils met, rulers begged for answers. But there were no answers, only silence and shadow. The galaxy felt small, weak, fragile. For the first time, they all admitted the truth. They had always believed humans were dangerous, but now they feared the thing that could silence humans was far more dangerous. Night after night, the shadow stretched across minds and worlds. It was not yet real, not yet visible, but it was felt. Every empire dreamed of extinction. Every child whispered of monsters. Every soldier looked to the sky as if expecting an enemy to arrive. And the name they gave to their fear was simple: the human extinction. Yet somewhere in the silence, a faint signal began to stir. Not strong enough for the galaxy to hear clearly, but just strong enough to carry a single word through the dark. That word was extinction. It echoed once, then faded again. The galaxy froze. Had humans been destroyed? Were they crying out for help? Or were they warning everyone else? No one knew. And that was worse than death, because ignorance bred fear, and fear spread faster than light. The galaxy waited, breathless. Every empire watched Earth. Every soldier waited for war. Every thinker searched for answers in the stars, but the only truth they found was silence. And in that silence, the shadow of extinction grew longer and darker. For in the end, it was not the silence that terrified the galaxy. It was the possibility that humans were not victims of extinction, but the first to see it coming, the first to prepare, the first to know. And if that was true, then the galaxy was already too late. The galaxy was drowning in silence. Empires waited, fleets waited, whole worlds waited. And then, without warning, the silence cracked. It began as a faint whisper, so faint that most machines dismissed it. But on a lonely station, orbiting a cold star, a young observer heard it first. Her receiver trembled, catching a sound hidden beneath the static. It was not a natural wave, not a star's song, not the hum of background space. It was something built, something shaped, something human. The observer shouted to her masters. At first they laughed, calling it error, a mistake, a trick of numbers. But when they listened closely, they heard it too. A signal, buried deep, weak but real. And within that signal was a word, one word that froze every throat. The word was extinction. The message spread like fire, across the Krall battle moons, across the Valen markets, across the Orath towers. Everyone replayed the word again and again. Extinction, extinction, extinction. Some believed it was a warning. Some believed it was a confession. Some believed it was a trap. In the chambers of the Orath thinkers, fear took a new shape. If humans were warning them, then something was coming, something so terrible that even humans chose silence to survive. But if it was a confession, then it meant humanity had already lost. The thinkers argued until their voices broke, and still, no answer came. The Krall warriors heard the signal and sharpened their weapons once more. Their leaders stood before their armies, growling words of rage. If the humans have fallen, then we must be next, they said. But if the humans are hiding, then we must prepare, for whatever hunts them will hunt us too. The warriors were restless. To fight without an enemy was madness. To wait without battle was worse. In the markets of the Valen, the traders no longer sold. They whispered every deal was shadowed. By the same question, was the word extinction meant for all, or only for Earth? The merchants began hoarding. They sealed their ships. They hid their treasures, for no amount of wealth could buy safety if extinction was truly moving across the stars. Meanwhile, in the dark corners of space, the scavengers listened too, and unlike others, they smiled. For to them, extinction was opportunity. If humans were gone, their world was ripe for plunder. If humans were dying, their weapons were waiting to be stolen. But even they hesitated, because the signal was too deliberate, too sharp, too dangerous. It was not a cry for help, it felt like bait. On Earth, deep underground, humans watched their signal move through the galaxy. The faint broadcast had been intentional, not a mistake, not an accident, but a choice. They had given the galaxy only one word: extinction, enough to stir fear, but not enough to reveal the truth. It was a game of shadows, and the humans were the players. In hidden bunkers, screens flickered with alien responses. They saw the panic spread. They saw the arguments rise. The humans whispered to each other. "The galaxy is afraid," they said. "Good," replied their commanders. Fear was a weapon, and right now, fear was stronger than any fleet. But not all watchers were fooled. On a quiet world orbiting twin suns, a group of philosophers spoke carefully. "What if the humans are not hiding from extinction?" they asked. "What if they are warning us because they have already faced it?" The others in the chamber shivered, because the thought was worse than death. It meant humanity had seen the enemy, touched it, fought it, and still chose silence. In every empire, the same visions grew: machines swallowing stars, shadows devouring light, armies turning to dust, cities vanishing in storms of fire. The galaxy dreamed of extinction long before it came, and all because of one fragile signal carrying one word. Yet the strangest part of all was this: the signal did not repeat. It came once, it was heard, and then it was gone. No follow-up, no second word, no longer transmission. The humans gave the galaxy a taste, and then silence again, as if daring the galaxy to guess the rest, as if daring them to imagine the truth. The watchers grew restless. Some called for unity, to prepare for whatever was coming. Others called for war, to strike Earth before its silence became a weapon. But most simply waited, paralyzed by fear, because the word extinction was too heavy, too final, and no one wanted to be the first to test if it was true. On Earth, the bunkers remained alive with quiet purpose. Soldiers trained in secret halls. Scientists studied the stars with eyes full of dread. Leaders spoke in whispers, their plans hidden even from their own people. The world above was quiet, but below, humanity was preparing, and the galaxy still could not decide. Was Earth already doomed, or was Earth preparing to save itself at the cost of everyone else? The signal had been small, but its echo was endless. Across millions of stars, the word extinction had taken root, and once planted, it could not be removed. For even in silence, the galaxy now heard only one thing: the heartbeat of doom. And they all knew the silence of Earth was no accident. It was the beginning of something far greater, something none of them were ready to face. Beneath the silent Earth, far below the quiet cities and the empty skies, life still moved. The surface looked dead, but underground, humanity was awake. They had not fallen. They had not vanished. They had not surrendered. They were waiting, preparing, hiding from eyes that never stopped watching. The silence had been a choice, not a defeat. Every satellite shut down, every broadcast ended, every signal silenced on command. It was not the collapse of civilization, but the beginning of a plan born in secret rooms, in hidden councils, in whispered meetings that lasted long into the night. For years, humans had seen something in the dark, patterns in the stars that did not belong, movements too large to be natural, too deliberate to be chance, old signals buried in cosmic noise, messages written not for them, but for something else. The scientists had argued, the governments had hidden the truth, but in the end, everyone agreed on one thing: something was coming. They called it the Devourer. Not because they understood it, but because they had seen enough to know what it did. Worlds erased, skies emptied, civilizations turned into ash. The Devourer did not conquer, it consumed. It was not an empire, it was not a people, it was something older, something mechanical, something endless. And the humans knew it had seen them, so they chose silence. In vast bunkers carved into stone, humanity rebuilt itself. Cities underground where the air was heavy but safe. Labs filled with glowing screens where scientists worked day and night. Forges where new machines were born. Weapons the galaxy had never seen. The world above grew quiet, but below, Earth became a furnace. The leaders gathered in secret councils. They spoke not of surrender, but of survival. They spoke not of fear, but of defiance. "We will not be food," they whispered. "We will not be erased." And so the plan was made. The Great Silence was only the first step. Children grew up never hearing the old noise of Earth. They did not know the endless chatter of screens or the songs that once filled the air. Instead, they learned discipline. They learned silence. They learned to hide. In schools deep underground, teachers spoke in whispers. They told stories of the old world, but also of the shadow in the stars. And the children listened, their eyes full of fire, for even the youngest understood. Silence was survival. Soldiers trained in hidden bases. They wore no flags, no colors, no names. They were not armies of nations anymore. They were armies of humanity. They learned to fight in tunnels, in darkness, in silence. They carried weapons built from secrets, weapons no alien had ever seen. And though their world above was quiet, their training shook the ground beneath. In the deepest labs, scientists built things no one else dared to imagine. Engines that could bend space, weapons that could burn stars, shields that could hide whole fleets from detection. Every invention born from desperation, every experiment fueled by fear. Some died in the process, some vanished into their work. But they all knew the truth. If humanity was to survive the Devourer, they would need to become something greater than human. The galaxy still watched, unaware of what was happening under the surface. They saw silence and thought of weakness. They heard nothing and imagined death. But if they could have seen the truth, they would have trembled. Because humanity was not dying. Humanity was transforming. In hidden command rooms, a single map glowed. It showed the stars, their paths, their dangers. It marked the places where civilizations had once thrived and now were gone. Empty systems, burned systems, devoured systems. The pattern was clear. The Devourer was moving closer, and Earth was next. The leaders knew they could not fight it alone, but they also knew they could not trust the galaxy. The other empires feared humans, hated humans, envied humans. They would never stand together, so humanity would have to fight first. They would strike not for glory, but for survival, and their silence was their shield. The weak signal they had sent, the single word extinction, was part of the plan. It was a seed of fear planted across the stars. If the galaxy feared extinction, they would turn their eyes away from Earth. If they feared humanity's silence, they would keep their distance. And in that distance, humanity would prepare. Every bunker, every lab, every hidden base moved with the same purpose: to survive, to fight, to endure. The Earth that the galaxy thought was dead was in fact more alive than ever. Every hand, every mind, every soul was bent toward one truth. Extinction was coming, but extinction would not find humans unprepared. In the darkness of their underground world, the people of Earth lit their fires, and in those fires, they forged not only weapons, they forged hope. Hope that when the Devourer arrived, it would meet not prey but predators, not silence, but fury, not extinction, but resistance. And though the galaxy still whispered in fear, though the Watchers still debated what the silence meant, humanity alone knew the answer. The silence was never the end, it was the beginning. The silence of Earth had lasted long enough that the galaxy began to believe it might never end, but silence does not last forever. One night, in the endless dark between stars, something stirred. At first it was only a shadow, a ripple against the background of space. Astronomers on distant worlds marked it down as nothing, a trick of light, but the shadow grew, and the more they studied it, the more they realized it was moving, not drifting like dust, not flowing like gas, but moving with purpose. The Devourer had arrived. It came like a storm with no beginning, a swarm of shapes, endless and shifting. Not alive, not truly, but not dead either. Machines of impossible size, machines older than memory. They stretched across systems, blotting out the light of suns. Planets that lay in their path vanished within days. One moment oceans shone under starlight, the next they were gone. Cities, mountains, even the bones of the world disappeared into silence. The Watchers had always feared humanity, but now their fear shifted. For compared to the Devourer, humans were small. The Devourer was not an empire. It had no kings, no armies, no flags. It was hunger made metal. It was extinction given form. The Orath thinkers wept in their towers. Their histories spoke of ancient losses, worlds gone without trace, and now they saw the truth. The Devourer was the hand that had erased them. It had always been moving, slow but unstoppable, and humanity had seen it first. The Kral warriors stood in silence, their blades useless. They had fought great battles, but how do you fight something that cannot be killed? How do you strike an enemy that has no blood? Some whispered of standing with humans, others whispered of surrender, but no one whispered of victory. The Valen traders closed their markets. What use was wealth when entire worlds could vanish in days? They watched there. Screens as ships fled in panic. Some were fast, but none were faster than the swarm. The traders realized something cold and final. If the Devourer wanted you, there was no running. You could only hide, or you could only fight. The scavengers laughed at first. To them, every disaster was a feast. But when they flew close to the edge of the swarm, they did not laugh again. Their ships melted into silence, their signals cut to nothing. The Devourer left no wreckage, no survivors, no proof, only emptiness where life had once been. And on Earth, hidden deep below oceans and stone, the alarms lit up, screens glowed red, commanders shouted orders. The Devourer had entered the outer rim of the galaxy. It was moving steadily toward the cradle of humanity. The plan was no longer theory. It was time. The leaders of Earth stood in a circle, maps of stars shone above them, paths of destruction already clear. They had always known this day would come, and now it was here. Some whispered of fear, but most stood with fire in their eyes, for humanity had chosen silence, not to surrender, but to sharpen its blade. The Devourer moved with no voice, no warning, no message. It did not announce itself. It did not speak of conquest. It simply consumed. Worlds blinked out one by one, signals went dead, and across the galaxy, panic turned into chaos. The Orath begged for answers. The Kraul demanded war. The Valen hoarded ships. The scavengers fled into dark corners. And still, Earth said nothing. But underground, fleets were rising. Engines roared in silence. Weapons hummed with power. Humanity was ready. The galaxy had always wondered what humans were preparing for. Now they had their answer. The silence had been their shield. The fear they planted had been their weapon. And now, with the Devourer revealed, humanity's choice became clear. They would not run. They would not beg. They would fight. The Devourer swept closer, and every world that fell sent a warning. The stars themselves seemed to flicker as it approached, and though the galaxy trembled, one truth echoed again and again. If anyone could resist, it was the humans. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the oldest, but because they refused to die quietly. On that day, the galaxy looked to Earth, not with hatred, not with envy, but with hope. Hope that the silent world had built something strong enough, something fierce enough, something human enough to face the Devourer. The enemy was revealed, the shadow had taken form, and extinction no longer whispered. It marched across the stars, step by step, system by system, closer to Earth, closer to the heart of humanity, closer to the final war. The Devourer moved closer with every passing day. Whole systems vanished, their light swallowed into silence. The galaxy screamed, but Earth remained quiet. And then, when the swarm reached the edge of humanity's sky, the silence ended. It began with a single spark. A beam of light erupted from Earth's surface, shooting into the heavens, then another and another, until the planet glowed like a waking giant. Satellites rose again, not weak machines of old, but new weapons forged in fire. The watchers across the stars gasped, for after years of silence, Earth had spoken, and its first word was war. From beneath the oceans, fleets emerged. Massive ships armored and alive with fire. Engines roared, shaking the waters above. From mountains, hidden doors opened, and towers of steel rose into the sky. Humanity had not been idle. They had been building, waiting, sharpening their blade in the dark. The Devourer did not pause. It saw movement and reached forward with endless arms, machines like storms, swarms like rivers of metal. But humanity was ready. The first strike came from orbital cannons. Lances of energy cut through the void, slicing into the swarm. For the first time in endless ages, the Devourer burned. The galaxy watched in awe. Signals that had been dead for years now exploded across space. Human commanders barking orders, fleets coordinating like one living mind. The humans were no longer divided, no longer scattered. They were united, not as nations, but as a species, and their fury was terrifying. The Kraul warriors roared in their halls, for they saw the humans do what they themselves had never dared. They saw defiance in the face of extinction. The Orath thinkers wrote in haste, their records trembling with new prophecy. The humans were not silenced by fear, they wrote. They were silenced by choice. The Valen traders fell quiet, for there was nothing to sell, nothing to buy, only survival. Even the scavengers froze in the shadows. For where others saw doom, they saw something greater. They saw hope. The Devourer struck harder. Worlds trembled as its swarm closed around Earth. But the humans fought with fire unknown. Ships tore through the void. Swarms of drones filled the sky. Weapons never seen before shattered the silence of centuries. Every strike carried one message. We are still here. In the deepest command centers, human leaders stood tall. They gave orders with steady voices, their faces lit by the glow of battles beyond the horizon. They had expected death, but they had prepared for victory, and now the moment had come. The first great battle shook the galaxy. The Devourer lost more in hours than it had in centuries. The humans bled, yes, ships torn apart, lives burned away. But they did not fall. Every death only sharpened their fury. Every loss only fueled their fire. And then, the true weapon was revealed, at the heart of Earth, deep in its hidden forges. The humans had built something more than ships, more than guns. They had built the Ascendant, a vessel larger than mountains, alive with energy. Its core burned brighter than a star. When it rose, the galaxy held its breath. When it fired, the Devourer screamed for the first time in all history. The swarm faltered, torn apart by power it had never faced. The humans pressed forward, pushing back the tide. And in that moment, the galaxy understood. The silence had never been weakness. The silence had been a forge. The silence had been preparation. The silence had been war. The Krall sent their fleets to join. The Orath sent their knowledge. Even the traders gave their ships. And for the first time in memory, the galaxy united behind humanity, not as masters, not as leaders, but as warriors who refused to die. The battle raged for days, then weeks. Stars burned, ships fell, worlds shook. But the Devourer, the endless hunger, met resistance for the first time, and it bled on the final day of the battle. As the swarm recoiled, a human voice echoed across the stars. It was carried on every channel, in every tongue, to every world. The voice said, "The day Earth went silent was not the day we died. It was the day we prepared, the day we sharpened our blade, the day we declared war on extinction." And with that, humanity struck one last time. The swarm scattered, broken, fleeing into the dark. The galaxy erupted with cries of victory, but Earth remained steady, silent once more, for humanity knew the truth. The war was not over. The Devourer was wounded, not destroyed. It would return, but so would they. The galaxy now looked at Earth with new eyes, not as prey, not as rivals, but as something else, something dangerous, something defiant, something eternal. And in the silence that followed, one truth remained: humanity had fought back, and humanity would never be silent again.